Quiet on set. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Let's Poddy podcast with your host, Benji Weatherly. It's the podcast where you learn absolutely nothing.
All right, welcome to Let's Poddy with Benji Weatherly, and my guest today, and probably frequently for the next 20 years that I'm going to be doing this thing, is my really good friend, childhood friend, and friend for life, Taylor Steele. Before I introduce you anymore, what is your middle name, Taylor?
My middle name is Shane.
What? He's such a Dorian fan.
So
glad I asked that. I never knew your middle name was Shane.
Patrick Shane Dorian. I could have been Shane Steele. And
that's right. You could have been in God's hands. We didn't even know that. All right. Well, now we know that. We know you're 48 and you've made every good surf movie since 90.
Yeah.
You're in Hawaii doing some work for a new brand that you started, and it makes me excited because it's my favorite thing to drink in the world. Tell us a little bit about your new venture that you got going on.
Yeah, well, I've been for the last 20 years sort of transitioning from surf films into doing different things, from doing commercials for Corona and all these other brands, and then I sort of started being a creative director for brands, and from there, I was basically doing all the selling and advertising for all these things that I was questioning whether I believed in what they were all about. So once I just said, I don't want to direct commercials that I don't trust the product or like what they're selling, even though I might need the money. So I decided then I'm going to create a brand that I stand for and it represents everything that I'm all about. And I created a brand called Salento, which means slow sun. And it's a tequila brand. And for me, the reason I picked tequila over like clothes or anything else is actually like my favorite moments in life are when that sunset time and we're sharing a drink with friends and catching up and talking stories. So I'm like, I could build around that, and that's why.
Yeah, that's cool, because the other day me and Kelly talked about it. Kelly happens to be a part owner. You have a lot of incredible part owners, actually. Are we allowed to even bring their names into this, or waiting to go public?
You know, like it's...
Or waiting to go to the next level?
For me, like a lot of alcohol brands or tequila brands even have a celebrity element to it, and we're not about the celebrity side, but we do have cool people involved that are either just supporting me or supporting the idea behind the brand. And so, Kelly and Mark McMorris and all these guys are a part of it. They're fine with me sharing it. I just don't like to go forward.
Yeah, me and Kelly were talking about it the other day, and it's like we've seen you go to every step, from creating One Step Beyond, being one of your first film projects, and creating your local vibe. It was one of his surf. It was your first. I mean, you had one before it, right? At School Project. But,
yeah, C7 Beyond.
C7 Beyond.
Everybody saw that one.
So, but when he made the movie, it was like his hometown. You know, he had Brad Gerlach and Rob Machado, a couple pros, but it was based more on the culture of his hometown, and it was like a tiny glimpse of what was to come for Taylor's surf movies, and it was really exciting because he showed it to me and a big group of pro surfers when we were little. I mean, I was 15 at a surf contest in Ventura when I first saw that film with the Malloys, and I think Kelly and Rob were there, and it blew our minds because it had Dag Nasty. I'm going to forget all the young punk bands, but all these punk bands that you'd never really heard of, and watching it like come together with free surfing and kind of junk waves in California, it really ignited all the young pros that was our group, that it became the Momentum Crew. That evening, I think it was daytime actually, we watched his movie in the living room at the Malloy's house, and we all were just shaking our boots like, oh my God, we got to make another one of these. And that's where, the whole thing kind of started. We went to Cabo the next few months, and I was 15, and we went camping. It was like he wasn't even making the film. He just happened to have his camera. Yep. And it was Jeremy Somerville, Travis Molina, and me and Taylor. And we found this wave down there, which we won't say the name because it's, whatever. It's kind of a local spot, or it's just a fickle dream spot, really. And that trip it was such a phenomenon because I wanted to be a pro surfer, but it was more of a dream. It was like I had sponsors and I was surfing pipe and stuff, but I wasn't going to be a pro surfer really. And then Taylor brought this video camera down for the second day. We found this wave.
No, that's the problem. The first day was a day.
It's so true. We went down to this. We had dune buggies.
We had a dune buggy, and the first day we showed up and we found the wave and we hit our car.
Remember we only had crackers and water. Yeah. It was those Marie crackers and water and like a banana. And we stayed down there all day. We were driving forever going down this dirt road, and we finally saw this little crevice between this little like valley. And when right when we saw it, I remember one of us was in the back of the dune buggy, like, stop! Oh my God! We saw a perfect right peeling down the point. So we got to the other side of the mountain and looked back, and what we saw was a joke. It was like our dream. We were little kids for one, so any wave looked perfect. Yeah. But it was a perfect point break, and we just happened. I mean, it was before Surfline. It was before Wave Report. So we woke up in the morning. We're like, "There's a hurricane swell." We didn't even know it was
like
coming.
40 foot front the beach break.
Yeah. So we go back. We surf all day. We have just sun. We look so sunburned, rashes everywhere. And we go back. We get supplies. And the next day was Travis Molina's birthday, and I think it was that night we slept there, right? Didn't we sleep there? Yeah, yeah. So we went and got more crackers, more water, and my mom didn't even know. And he grabbed his camera, which was like old school ones that were huge, like a VCR tape one. And so we go back down the next morning, same thing, about 4 to 5 foot, perfect point break. That I remember on that I had my shark watch, and I remember catching a wave that went for like a minute and a half or 2 minutes. And it was just us. And Taylor filmed that afternoon and got me and Travis Molina and Jeremy Somerville about 5 waves each, and ended up being the opening section for his Momentum, the very first one. And I remember being at the premieres of right in your hometown, and all the kids were freaking out and stuff. My name came up on the video, and I'm going, oh my God, I think I could be a pro surfer. And I was like, I did it. I made a surf movie, right? And the coolest part is the reason why our dynamic was so great with the Momentum generation is because he was the same age as us. Like, not filmmakers were always these older gentlemen that were, way past our age group. So it was really hard to relate, and it was really hard to understand what they were trying to create because we're so far apart. Yeah. But that movie, he went on that trip, and then he went to Porto next?
I went to Porto, and then...
And then he went to Porto with who? I mean, so our trip was kind of like a little side salad. It was cool, but he went with the real guys at the time.
Porto was like, I didn't know that Cabo stuff would even make the movie. That was just like filming it with my friends. And then I was at a PSAA at Trestles, and Rob's like, hey, we're all going to Porto in 3 days. You should go. And I'm like, I don't know anybody going.
And Porto was unknown.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I was more like, I don't know anybody on the trip, and I don't feel comfortable. And Rob's like, you're going. And so I flew down by myself, and I went down there, and I knew the photographer, Mike Balzer, so I stayed in his room. And then the guys that showed up were like Kelly Slater, Todd Chesser, Brock Little, Shane Dorian, Ross Williams, Pat O'Connell, Vinny de la Pena. And then there was Rob showed up too. Rob showed up a couple days later, I think.
Ross.
And Ross Williams. Ross. Yeah. And there was a couple others, I think. It was such a big crew, and that sort of was the start of it, because I remember I had this session. It was like a bigger day out, and like down from Porto, there's like sort of this right peak, and it was heavy for me. And I was surfing, and it was just me, Brock, and Chesser, and I got
how's that crew?
I know,
the gnarliest guys ever.
I got a wave that I paddled, scrambled to the side, tuck off late, dropped in, and stood up, and the thing spit so hard it knocked me off my board. And when I came up, Brock was claiming it, and I was like,
no way.
I'm like, wow,
that's the coolest thing ever.
That just changed my whole deal, because that I felt like
part of the crew.
Part of the crew, and I could like. When I saw them, I wasn't just like a creepy video guy on the beach. I was a surfer too, and that was important to me to have that element.
That's insane.
And so,
how old are you at this point? You're like only 19.
I think I was 18, 19, if that. And
did you even know about having enough batteries and having it all? Like, I mean, you weren't even prepared probably for what was to come.
You know what? That year, I've never had enough batteries, and Kelly's like, just invest and buy a couple more batteries, man.
He's like, I'm going to do the best air of my life. Don't miss it.
Yeah, so Kelly sort of coached me to buy more batteries. I'm like, I was always just like had the minimum, and so I just like stocked up on batteries, and I would still forget to charge them. I'd forget tapes all the time. I was such a rookie. My dream was to be a pro surfer, and I was nowhere near good enough. So this was like my second choice, is to be a filmer and be able to hang with everybody.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to, like everybody after that trip, and then.
And you guys didn't watch footage back then, right? Or did you?
There's a funny story. So we could all watch footage, but you'd look through the viewfinder, which was black and white, little viewfinder, and I'd let people watch their clips. If they got a good one, I could let them watch it.
On that trip?
On that trip. And like, that was a trip that Kelly did that backside air.
I was getting to that. I want that to be the end of the story.
I'll get to that. But the funniest thing is, like, Vinny De La Pena, who went on to run Ezekiel and then a whole bunch of other brands. Yeah. He was a pro surfer then and doing quite well in the PSA things, but he got a sick barrel at Porto, and I let him watch the footage, and he goes, "Hey, something's wrong." And I look in the viewfinder, and he's recording.
Oh no!
And so
this is the reason why my whole life was based around you're not allowed to watch footage. So he messed it up from the beginning.
So when I hit pause and I watched it back, he's dropping in, and it goes pink to black.
Oh my god!
And then it goes back on, and he's coming out of the barrel with his hands raised.
Oh no! That's why Vinny never got in the movies.
That's right. That was the difference.
No. So this story is really prevalent in my life because every time we'd film for the next 25 years, you would always get like one of the best waves you had in a long time, and you're always like, "Taylor, can I watch it?" He's like, "Nope." Nope. He's like, "You want to lose all the footage?" And you'd always be like, "No, I don't. But I just want to see if it was as good as I thought." So here, this story makes me laugh because that's Vinny. Next time I see you, man. No, but this trip was legendary in so many different ways. But the one that really, really, really rings and through my brain and soul is that backside air Kelly does, which is the cover of your is that the Momentum cover?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first backside no grab inverted backside air landed at that point. And the best part is he's riding like a 6'6" pintail.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I can't wait to hear. I've never heard you tell me this story, but I heard that it was the last wave of the trip, right? It was literally like right. You guys are about to go to the airport.
It was the last wave of the trip, and what's interesting on that is, for people that don't know, like Chester and Brock are they were our big brothers, and like we try to do little things to impress them.
Yeah, totally.
And they're walking up the beach, and Kelly knew it, and everybody was sort of on the beach, sort of like ready to walk, and the winds went from offshore to onshore.
So all these guys are standing with you now.
Yeah,
like Brock was there. I remember.
Brock and Chester were like already starting to walk, and they're sort of further down, but they were still in line with where Kelly was, and everybody else was sort of by me. And Kelly takes off and just hits that and does that air and sticks it, and it was like.
Did anyone even claim it, or were they just like, what did we just see?
The crew with me didn't claim it. Well, they were just like hooting or something, but like Brock and Chester, I just remember they just saw it and then they just turned and kept walking.
Yeah, I mean, for what they were to us, they're our heroes, but they hated airs. When we do tail slides, they call them pancake turns and stuff.
Flying squirrels.
Flying squirrels. Yeah, airs were called flying squirrels. So I'm sure at that moment they knew, like, what are we in for the next 20 years of these guys doing flying squirrels? But I always loved that story. I only knew little bits because at that point I was only 15, almost going on 16, and we just did that Cabo trip. I think we did Cabo first, right?
Yeah, Cabo.
Yeah, so I had that in the bank, but in the bank meaning like never thought it'd be in a surf movie. And then that trip, hearing about it, and then seeing Kelly's air, and all those guys were my hero, and they're like 3 or 4 years older. So that story always, I loved that, and that was basically your first real pro surf trip. Film,
yeah,
right?
that was my first trip, and then from there, that was October. Then, like I went home, and I felt like, okay, I have the foundation to start making a film now, and I went. I'm going to go to Hawaii, and I'm going to go to Hawaii in early October, and I had a friend, Aka Lyman, that used to come and surf with Paul Roach, and he's like, you can stay at my house. So me and a friend, Chad Alessandro, we flew over. Before we even flew, it was funny because we're like, we're going to Hawaii. We don't know what Hawaii's like. So we started swimming to the kelp beds every day.
No way, rad.
We were like training for Hawaii. We're like,
That's
okay, we're going to go to
insane.
Hawaii. So we were swimming to the kelp beds every day, and it's like pretty far out there in California. And then we fly over and we get to Aka's house, and first at the airport, we're 18. We tried to rent a car. They wouldn't let us rent a car. You have to be 26 at the time. And so we couldn't rent a car. And then we get to Aka's, and literally Aka has nowhere to sleep in his house. And so we're sleeping. I was sleeping on the wood floor in the kitchen. And they're like farmers. And so they get up.
Pupukea, right?
Yeah, they're farmers in Pupukea, and they get up early, like super early. And every morning they'd click on the light, and I'll be like on the floor like a cockroach. And then like they'd step over me, make their coffee, and like
Oh my
cook.
God, that's great.
And so, but the heavy thing was every day we'd have to walk with our boards down from Pupukea all the way down to the beach.
That's 4 or 5 miles.
4 or 5 miles up a steep hill.
Heavy.
And nobody.
This is 1990,
yeah.
right?
Yes.
On the dot, 1990.
And
Jesus.
nobody would pick us up. We would hitchhike, and nobody would grab us, and we just walk every day, do this thing. So we were like, this is tough. So we heard there's a van for sale. And we bought a van, and we're like, okay, we'll sleep in that, and then we could at least have transportation.
What did you pay for the van? Do you remember?
I think it was like $500 for the van. And
What did you guys put down? Futons? I never looked in that van. It was parked in front of my house, by the way.
You know what we had
I remember it being white. Am I wrong?
It was white. Yeah. What we had on the floor was our board bags. And we had board bags, and we would just shop at Foodland, dry food, like whatever we could eat that was dry. And we would park at Pipeline or the school, Sunset Elementary. And we'd get kicked out by the police like every other day. And they'd we'd just move to one or the other. And I remember Chad was super worried about mosquitoes, so he would spray bug spray inside the van.
That's good for you.
But yeah, so we were sleeping in the van, and we were doing that whole thing. I would say probably at least 3 weeks to a month we were in there. And I knew Benji from, I think our trip was after, now that I think about it.
Yeah, it was after that, because that was before I really knew you.
I only met you at Malloy's house on that earlier.
So that's what it was. So this winter, I didn't really know him yet, and he was in the van, and he would always walk down the path, which is next door to my house. And Chad had a helmet, and which was smart. He was one of the first guys, like Carol wore him in the late '80s, but he was one of the first guys that was a free surfer that I saw wearing a helmet, which was genius. I still haven't done that. My head's too thick. But Taylor was there basically to film him and whatever else you could get, right? It wasn't I'm making momentum.
I was like filming everybody at Pipe, and Chad was there to just surf.
And it was such a good winter that year. It was 89, 90 winter?
80, no, it was 1991.
Okay.
But it was, Chad was there just to surf, and I was there to make a surf film, and I was just going to film everybody that surfed Pipe.
Right.
I filmed everybody.
You never really filmed Rockies and anything else.
No,
it was just Pipe, huh?
Just Pipe.
And I want to know where momentum came from. When did that come into your brain cell?
That was after I got all the footage, and then I started thinking about the surfers' age that were in it, and just like I always think of.
You remember when it came to were you at like dinner or what? When did you go? This is the funny part about his names. He would always name it something, and I'd go, I don't like it, and then he would name it that, and it was a huge hit. So he'd always ask me, "Do you like it?" And I'd say no, and he'd go, "I'm using it."
Yeah.
When did that one come to?
That one I was just. I think I was playing tip-in little basketball.
Of course he was.
Out the back, and I just remember like. So for me, I'll work on a name for months. Right. I'll be constantly thinking about it, and it's almost like if you work on something that long, even when you sleep, it processes through your head. And that one I just kept thinking about, and I wanted it to be short, so it's easy to remember. Like I wanted a real easy name, and so yeah, that one.
That's so crazy how big it got. I mean, you even had Momentum Under the Influence. That was one of the biggest, best movies I ever. Yeah. I mean, I think that movie, it really did justice for the next generation. That movie's just as good as Momentum. Yeah. That's why I always loved that the next generation, it meant so much to them, the Momentum one, that they want to keep that legacy going. Like even the new generation, Leo and all, like those kids want to do their generation. Yeah. And that just shows you how impactful that was. And I don't know. I just always loved the names you came up with. I mean, we could go over them, like what was the other one? Momentum 2 is obvious, but then it went into what was our next
Focus,
one?
Good Times.
And how did you get that name? Was it Focus Camera or Focus in your brain? What was it in your head?
Oh, that's interesting.
I never know.
I think it was mostly on Focus in your brain, but I liked the idea it had double meaning. I liked the idea Momentum had double meaning, which is why I sort of went with it. It was like could mean the surfer's career, it could be the waves, it could be a lot of things.
And obviously, Good Times is what it really was about.
Good Times it was like it was appropriate. We were there.
You were there, and you even had our favorite band make the song, which was so cool. I mean, I think I don't want to change too big of a subject, but I think the bands. I was thinking about last night what I was going to ask you and talk to you about, and the thing that people don't realize, our generation knows it, but the younger kids is. Taylor, even one step beyond, it was a time in the world where the music genres changed. We came out of the 80s and we're Depeche Mode and those kind of bands were going away, even the glam rock.
Glam rock was big.
And glam rock was just ending. And then Taylor's movies came out and he busted out these bands that were unknown punk bands. And at the time, snowboard, skateboard, all of those industries didn't do the editing the way Taylor did. And it really took off because of that. I mean, our surfing was great, but the music, the way he edited it, I remember him editing to like, let's say Machado's Turn to like a Dag Nasty drum beat, bah! And the way he did it, it just made the whole thing come together. And I just love the fact that Pennywise, when we met Pennywise, the guy, Jim, was selling vacuums. And I think they sold 10,000 albums up to that point after like 6 years of trying. Or so a long time.
There was like a year break.
They kind of quit almost.
Their album was Done Sells.
And then this asshole brings in the Pennywise guys into his Momentum 1, and it literally blew up to where they're on stage and they thank Taylor for everything, and it blew my mind. I was just like, these guys are literally grateful for Taylor putting them in their surf movie. Years later, bands were like suing us because they were too big time and all stuff. So it was a very amazing time because we go to these premieres and Pennywise has Momentum shirts on and having all the surfers sign it, and then they're jamming and thanking Taylor Steele, and the whole thing, it was just, I got chicken skin. Let's put it that way. It was such a time that will never, I mean, I pray it happens again, but it's such a unique moment. And I think that's why this is such a great thing for all of us to look back on.
Yeah.
Is the fact that these bands, I mean, Offspring, they became so big and they played at our premiere in Hollywood unplugged and thanked Taylor all over again. And it's really neat to see that you helped them and they helped us and you helped us. And it was just this one big thing that went together.
Yeah, it was a full symbiotic relationship where everybody was on the same path as a team, which I love.
Like picking each other up to come along.
Everybody was helping each other, and you know what? It was amazing to have Pennywise be surfers, or some of them surfed. Jim, the singer, surfed, and Fletcher surfed, because they really were stoked on that subculture that we were about, and they embraced it. And they would come and stay in my house and sleep on the floor and play pool for the dish duty, whoever did the dishes. And so they were so behind it, and they were so excited to be a part of it, and they were fans of you guys as well. And it showed. It was just like a lot of those bands blew up really fast, and like Offspring back then, they blew up. They didn't have a previous album that's plateaued, and then they came up after. They were like their first album was in Momentum 2, so they were like, all of a sudden they just had this success, and they thought they didn't know what part we played, and I don't even know, but Pennywise definitely knew the success and the correlation between the movie, so they always brought me on every tour, and they would release their albums on the next movie. So they're like, "When's your next movie coming out? In a year and a half? Okay, we'll do our thing then."
That's insane.
And so then we would just do these tours together, and the movie would open up, and then they would play, and it was just they paid for my ticket to go to Australia and tour with them, and like, it was just a beautiful time. And like for me, that was always what I fell in love with, more so than the filmmaking side. And this is before I even fell in love with filmmaking. I fell in love with the team element of it all. Yeah. And like as a filmmaker, I wasn't that good, in the beginning. But I loved the fact that like you guys were listening to my advice on like maybe do combos and maybe like do some like let's get more lefts.
We fed off of Taylor's energy, like especially me because that's I'm a very emotional person, and a lot of us are. Everyone actually in the crew is very emotional and very sensitive, especially to their craft. And if he, I mean, we were so connected to this guy that when you would film, you would know who got the best waves that day. And I'm always been on the bottom end of our crew because not only am I younger, but these guys are the best that have ever done it. So you'd come in and you were just like me and Kalani and those guys were just like hoping that you would look at us and be like, any kind of like little like you did it. And it was never like you did so great because Taylor wasn't good at that. Like I'm not good at it. I could never tell someone how much I cared or anything like that. But you would give us like a little inkling, like, yeah, that was a good one. And you'd be like, keeper. That was a keeper. And you're like, what the fuck, really? Okay, good, I'm good. Because he wouldn't let you watch footage. So you're just like hoping. No. And at the end, he would give you about 2 weeks before he's like, hey, the cutoff's in 2 weeks. And he would go, you really need some backside waves. He'd be like, that backside's kind of a little lacking. And so you would just focus and be like, okay, that means this and that. And it was just a fun dynamic to go through because...
That doesn't sound very fun. That sounds pretty
intense. It was intense. But creating I'm not going to say we're artists, but creating something, you kind of need that pressure to
It was a little bit of a pushing.
Yeah. It was harsh at times, but I loved it because at the end you made diamonds. You made things out of all of us, pushing us to that point. I mean, when guys would get too big time for it, Taylor would just be like, fine, whatever. And then those people would be running back like, I was kidding. Like it was one of those things, man. It was really fun times.
Yeah, like I think though I approached each person differently. Like I don't think I ever gave Kelly a compliment for 10 years.
Yeah.
And he was so used to everybody coming up to him and kissing his ass and like sort of like doing that. And I just didn't want him to seem like I was favoring him over other people. So I would give other people compliments, and it drove Kelly crazy to like really sort of get it.
Yeah.
And it worked for him, and I treated it a little bit like Coach, like Phil Jackson or something like that, where I wanted to inspire everybody to do their best surfing.
But then you tiptoed around the guys that didn't need it.
And I just had to balance politically where I didn't make people feel there's favorites or anything like that, and really. We knew Kelly was always going to get the last section because he was just like a couple notches above everybody else. 100%. But yeah, like we would watch the session once at the end of the day, and we'd all get in a room, and those peanut galleries, were so intense, like because it'd be every wave. So I was on blast too because if I missed a wave, people would get on my case.
Yeah, we got to talk about that. Like watching the footage after, we're talking about your heroes standing behind you. It was the most intense moments of my life. It would be like this. I'm going to use the campaign boat trip as an example. It was Tom Curran, Kelly, Rob, CJ Hobgood, and me. And if you heard all those names, besides Rob, they're all world champs. And Tom Curran was my favorite surfer, and Kelly was at his peak at that moment. And we would watch the footage in the boat. And I'm not kidding you. Tom was so stressed out. Sorry, Tom. But he was so stressed out, like I was watching the footage, that he would walk outside the boat and look in through the window outside those porthole things and watch the footage outside. And I would be like looking over my shoulder. And the only person that was comfortable was Kelly. He would sit right in the middle and just watch and he'd love to downplay everything, right? I mean, someone would do something like, it was okay. And Kelly, it was the only guy that could actually critique the footage because he was on the level that we all weren't. So, and Tom was so nervous because at that point, he wasn't past his prime, but he was still a little behind Kelly at the time because Kelly was the man. And I just remember feeling the stress from Tom because we're watching the footage. He was riding kind of a weird board, but those moments made you who you were. Because I would watch it, and if I had cringed and I was bummed, the next day I tried 10 times harder because I did not want to get back the next night and go through that all over again. I'm like, okay, I'm not sitting out there. I'm not going to wait my turn. I'm going on every wave. I'm doing this. And it would advance your surfing. That trip advanced my surfing the most out of all of your trips I did with you. And it was because of those film sessions where you're sitting in that room shaking.
Yeah.
And then you filming going, I hope I didn't get that one wave that Tom got and I missed it. And now he doesn't want to film with me anymore. It was just insane.
Well, like everybody at that stage, even like Momentum 2 on, everybody knew that the movies had an impact. Mm-hmm. And so for me, like it was stressful to not miss a wave. Like I had that same stress that you guys had on ripping. to not miss the wave of the day.
Right.
And so
Doesn't come back.
I would be filming waves that were like okay, but they, at any moment someone could like turn a wave around and make it a great one, and filming it without even looking to make sure the wave behind it was better. Make sure that Kelly's not going. Whenever Kelly was like, "You're coming,"
Oh shit! I'll do the biggest error of my life. Like, oh god, we didn't miss it.
But yeah, so like I was constantly like, because the waves were sometimes people would split peaks and go the opposite directions, or people would, and so for me it was
think fast, man.
I had to make judgment calls on the fly, and I just remember like one thing that people don't realize when you're filming the top guys, they're like, oh, that's easy, anybody could do it. But at the end of the day, I was so exhausted from filming and concentrating and watching the ocean that I was just couldn't even speak. I was exhausted. Like it felt like I worked out all day.
Well, people don't understand when they watch the videos, especially at Macaronis, the Indonesian footage. You're talking about a beach that's 100 degrees, has malaria, you're seasick. You're like, you don't even realize what it's like to be on a boat for 14 days and then go on the beach and then film in 100-degree weather and then not miss a wave. And there's hundreds of waves that I can't even. And then they have to get to the beach. Okay, that's the one. Let's talk about you with your giant case of a $10,000 worth of camera equipment
in a Pelican with a tripod, and you're paddling in with a boogie board, and the waves are washing you on sharp reef.
Okay, that's just to get in to do the stressful work.
Then I'll set it up a little bit. You do that, and then you carry this huge Pelican because it's so heavy because you stacked everything in this one thing, and you got one arm. Like I'm a skinny kid. And like one arm, you're dragging this big thing with a tripod, and you can't set it down because you're in waist deep reef, and you're walking across all this. You get to the beach, you set up, you get your angle, you're all good. Everybody paddles out, they surf, they all go in, and you're sitting on the beach still. You're just there by yourself waving, and you're like, oh, okay, I think they're done. You don't know. There's nobody letting you know that they're done for the day. They're going to drive to another place, and you're sort of watching the boat. Like, am I done, or am I going back out?
You've already been there 6 hours.
And then you'll see like Tom Kern will paddle back out, and you're like, oh, okay.
He just got up from a nap.
Yeah.
In the AC.
And so someone will show up late. They'll surf, and they're just about done. And you're like, okay, I think that's it. I'm going to go get lunch, and then everybody else jumps back in the water. They've already eaten and rested, and then it's
so true.
It's a rotation of that. So you're doing 12-hour days, and I remember like coming to the boat, and my feet were so swollen, sunburned that they looked like little like sausages. Every little toe was a sausage.
And you have eaten like banana all day?
I haven't eaten all day. I'm so fried, and my brain's just fried from watching the waves and picking which one's the right one.
And now you're on a boat that goes like this.
And then I'm on a boat, and I used to get seasick. But all those experiences, like even sleeping in the van until Benji let me. I didn't even get to go into Benji. Like let me sleep in his house. But all those experiences like weren't even like that bad because I was doing what I loved. Right. It was like so obvious that was like
the payoff at the end was so fun.
It was such a reward, and it was such a fun environment to be around with the crew and feel like you had a part in the whole thing, and you weren't just like a bit player that was like chasing their dreams. Yeah. We all had our dreams, and we were all going with it. But like my dad used to call me poor specimen because I was,
give us that. What I've heard that name since I met Taylor Steele. Poor specimen. That came from your pops?
My dad used to call me that when I was like 12, 13. He's like, come on, poor specimen, get off the couch. Go do something.
That's who came up with that? I love it. And his dad is the all-time human being.
So, like, I was pretty lazy as a kid. I was creative, but I was pretty lazy until I found my passion. And then it was like all those things of like, being in the sun all day and working hard, and all that felt like nothing when I found it. So, like, for me, I try to push people to find their passions. But I want to go back a little bit to like that van sort of situation, and Benji's retold the story in Momentum Generation. That wasn't correct.
Oh, there we go. That's even better. Let's correct the mainstay.
So I set it up. I went from Akka Lyman's house down to the van, and me and we're sleeping.
How long did you stay in that van?
I would say 3 weeks. 3 weeks in the van
before I met you.
Yeah, so that was like coming into mid-November. I was in the van, and your mom.
Early winter then.
Yeah, I got Hawaii October 16th.
Wow, that's early.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was in there for 3 weeks. Maybe I would say like we're coming close to like a week before Thanksgiving or something like that. And your mom went on a trip. She went to California.
Yeah, she always did back then. Yeah.
she went to California, and then I think like 2 weeks before, I asked you if I could charge my batteries there because I didn't have a power outlet where I was. And so I was charging my batteries at your house, and then you were sort of let me sort of like linger in the front yard and sort of like watch waves when you guys were watching waves there. And then once she left, you're like, hey, my mom's gone. You could crash here for 2 days or something like that. And I remember me and Chad were so excited to be in a house.
You slept in the kitchen. No, just kidding.
we did all the chores. We started sweeping the floors.
Oh,
we were doing the
remember
dishes.
how much sand was on our floors?
So much.
Back then, we would always say, you guys clean your feet, but no one would. I mean, it was this thick. My mom would go, I don't care about all this stuff. Just sweep the floor at the end of the day. Yeah. And there would be a pile of sand this much.
So it was impossible to keep it clean. But we just did all the chores that Benji was meant to do. And so, like, me and Chad were
15
like
15 guys, I was 15.
Benji's slaves. But he didn't ask us to do it, but we just knew that that's the way that you sort of like earn your keep. And like, who wouldn't want someone to stay there if he's doing all your chores? And so like that, we did all the chores, and then like your mom came back like 10 days later, and you're like, hey, these guys are cool. She
invited you to Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah, something like that.
She said, "Hey, why don't you let them come in for Thanksgiving or something?"
That's right.
Yeah.
You put it back like a couple months.
Yeah.
But yeah, that
was
was
a long time ago.
That was a while ago. But
then after that, you stayed with me, and then when did you go back to California? Was it in December? You stayed through Christmas, right?
I stayed till February 15th.
Wow. And was that the year we did the Christmas video, or was it the next year?
Next year. That was like the Christmas video as a gift to all the guys.
And that was Momentum 2's?
Yeah, it was like Momentum 2. No, I never aired it. To this day, it's never been seen.
I thought it was on a video, no?
No.
It was never on a video.
No,
People in California would always say, I saw it. Somehow they
I gave 14 copies to everybody on VHS, and people might have shared it via that way.
A lot of the footage of the Christmas video, not a lot, but some of it came out in the Momentum movie. Yeah. Like Pat O'Connell talking about his genitalia.
And the
Seth
interview in Chester.
Those are all from the Christmas video. If you ever get to see that video, it's beyond amazing, because he literally made it in my living room holding like a VCR down.
2 VCRs.
Yeah, he was like VCR back and forth and made that. He edited it in my living room. It was all time. And I think we put the songs were so ridiculous. They put Whitney Houston to Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly's girlfriend at the time would play this Whitney Houston song.
Kevin Costner.
And Kelly, it was like nonstop repeat at his place, and he hated it. And so
he put it to his.
I always sort of like secretly like did little pokes at Kelly to.
Had to keep him on the ground. Yeah, man. He was above ground at that point in time. He's way down to earth now.
But yeah, that video is just to sort of a gift to all the guys, and so I didn't think it was cool to release it ever.
It's so great. But yeah, to see where you're at right now in life really makes all of the crew so happy. I mean, Kelly doesn't really give too many people in our crew props unless they deserve it, and he's been saying the highest praises lately. And to see where all your creativity has come to a point to do the Salento brand we talked about the other day is so exciting, because all the stuff that Taylor's learned when he's on the Chevy commercial, the HP laptop commercial, and all those things, and laughing like this is so easy, probably than sleeping on the beach trying to get footage. And to see you go all the way around to your own brand and see it created through all your hard work is so great.
Yeah, thank you. I think like one of the things that I've been really conscious of lately, and I think it's an important thing that everybody should just think about, is like what happens when you achieve all your dreams. And I achieved my dreams at 18, and like I really like had this huge success at an early age, and it's probably the same as like all you and Kelly and everybody. We sort of achieved our dreams, and it's like, well, you don't want to be one of those guys that where you're older and you're like going like, oh, in high school I was a football star and now I'm just bitter and grumpy. So it's like resetting your dreams is an important thing to do. And I would constantly work on resetting my dreams and realigning it so that the future always seemed better than the past. And so for me, I don't know.
I'll tell you that. Because you know what? That's why I wanted to talk to you about this interview more than anything, to be honest, is how he perceived his life when he had a family. He got pregnant with Jaden, and then Mila's his second. And when they started having kids, Taylor told me, and I'm going to be completely honest, I didn't think you were really going to do it. I mean, I was the guy that wanted to live in Bali, and I wanted to live in Europe, and I had all these dreams, right? I was going to own a house here and own it. And then the only person that actually did that was Taylor Steele, and he did it in a way that's, hearing you say that it was like a reboot, It's so true because that's what you did, and it really inspired all of us. But you're the only one that really took it to the next level. And so what he told me when he first had his child is, I'm going to live in Bali for 7 years. I'm going to live in Australia for 7 years. I'm going to live in Europe for 7 years. France, I think, is what you said.
Yeah.
And I was like, sure you are. Yeah, sure you are. And this is a baby he's holding, right? And I'm like, you're not going to leave California. You got all this going on. You're killing it right now. You're at the top of the game. And I remember thinking, he's blowing it, dude. What is he going to do in Bali? It's so scary. It's this, it's that, all this stuff. And just like you're saying just then, you really did have that mindset of, I need to find the next thing. And I remember you're in Australia and you're making commercials, I think, over there and doing other things. And I'm like, dude, he doesn't know what he's doing. Like he's getting out of his comfort zone and to see how much it's progressed. And then when you're in New York, how quickly you expanded your directing and all that stuff. And to see it's something that everybody, especially me, needs to do is just reboot. Because after my surf career ended 5 years ago, I legitimately was depressed. I didn't know what to do with myself. And I threw myself into learning how to work. Because that's the only thing my friend Jake Burton told me. He's like, the only thing you need to learn is how to work. Go work. And he goes, don't think of it as I have to find something I love. He goes, just learn how to work, man. Learn how to manage people. Learn how to do something different. And so I did. And it was the hardest 4 years of my life. And now I feel great. I feel like that's why I'm doing podcasts now, as I finally feel like I can breathe. But what Taylor said earlier, and I've watched him do it, and take his word for it, you need to find new things to keep going.
Yeah, I think like just on, they say that people that retire, that soon after they retire, their lifespan gets shorter from that because they don't have their purpose. And so it's really sort of finding your purpose, finding your new passion. And I'm curious with how people do that, because I think it's sort of easy to get to your first passion. Like you have that as a child and you go there. But your second one is tough. That one is scary.
You have responsibility,
your
thoughts,
your ego's in the way, where you've done success over here and you don't want to ever fail, and those people will be judging you, and you're going in a new space and you don't know how to do it. So getting that beginner's mind and that sort of childlike ideas of being okay to fail, and using, I guess, like for me, like to sum it up is like, we should have a learning mentality always. We should always be wanting to learn and not feel that we know it. If we know it, then you got to get better. You got to do it and get better and better and better at something. And it's just that's with career, but it's also with yourself as a person. You should, like, I was super shy as a kid, and I've worked on trying to be more outgoing and communicate better.
That blows me away. So he was the guy when I were younger that couldn't articulate what he wanted. And like in his movies and stuff, you would have to read him, and it was really hard to get it out. And now to see you direct, and I'm talking 10 years ago, when I hung out with you to do a project, I think it was like the last drive-thrus and stuff, you were so much more focused and you were so much more adamant about what you wanted. And it was so like, wow, Taylor's totally got a different mindset now. And it was way more professional and way more, you were getting better and better. And that's why to see you now with your own brand, it's like now you can direct and create your own thing, like you were saying, it's a pinnacle for you, and it's progression.
Yeah, and so like I think like all those things you should be working on how to be a better person for yourself. And what helped me sort of like with it all is like finding that self-love and finding like just sort of like not being so hard on yourself. Mm-hmm. Your inner voice, like having that inner voice not be so mean, and just have that inner voice go like, you could do it, come on, just takes time, give yourself patience and be kind to yourself in that way, and just work on yourself, your relationship, your work, and just know that it's not perfect and it's never going to be perfect, and just keep
enjoy the process.
Enjoy the process.
I think honestly, I run now, I eat well, I'm doing all these things, and that's what's making me happy. It's not the end of the game. It's not this end game. For us, when we were young, it was always, I can't wait for my sponsor to sign me a new big deal and be on this cover of a magazine and be the best in this video part. Now it's like, I want to go through the process because it makes me feel whole. Like that whole thing. And I'm watching you do it. It's like, I'm watching you run which is going to be one of the biggest tequila companies in the world. I'm watching you run direct commercials. And then at the same time, you have time for your family and time for your friends. And you give me time all the time when we have real conversations. that's the meaning of life, man.
Yeah.
It's, having purpose and then having family and friends and love.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat, man. I'm stoked that we got to do this.
This is awesome.
We're going to have a way longer one, you guys, with Taylor, because I'm just getting this podcast started. This is only volume 2. My first one of Fred and Ross is coming out right before this one, but I'm going to launch it next week. And, man, we're going to go for a 3-hour one with maybe one of your daughters next time. We can talk to her about her life, or we could bring in Rob Machado. We can bring in any of your...
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to do a bigger group one. But, it's fun watching you go from being a pro surfer to being running breakers to being an amazing chef to doing this podcast. Like, you're pushing yourself in that sense.
I hope I'm progressing.
So
5 years ago, you couldn't say that. I honestly am inspired, and this is like my big brother, best friend, everything, and he's done everything for me to get me to this point. You only get to those points by doing it yourself, but without people that make you motivated and positive thinking and pull you out of the darkness when you're there. I've been in dark places, as you've seen in the Momentum movie, but and everyone goes through these times. So it's just nice to have people in your life that are like this. All you have to do is pick up the phone and be like, hey, I need a pat on the back, and I need to be talked to, because at the end of the day, everybody goes through it. So it's just fun that we have these outlets now, like podcasts, that we can actually help other people and just talk it out.
For sure. Like, I guess I've been looking at the meaning of happiness a lot lately, and what I've learned is that happiness comes from a really sound community, and your friends and family are what makes that. So, I think we all went from families that some were solid, some weren't, but when we came together, we became a family, and
everyone's doing great,
and because everybody sort of helped each other at the right times, and that's one of those things that will keep going. And so it's fun to watch you on this journey too, as a family and brother. I look at you as my big brother too.
Yeah. Love you, Tay. I appreciate your time, and can't wait for the next podcast we're going to do. We'll talk about something totally different. I just wanted to get the simple questions that people didn't know, like Taylor Shane Steele. What? I did not know that, man. And I always wondered why he likes Shane Dorian the most. I get it. Love you, Tay. I can't wait to see what Salento does. Everybody, when you see Salento organic tequila in a store, know that you got to try it. I say Añejo, but Blanco seems like it might be everyone else's favorite. But love you. Have a good trip back to California. I can't wait to have you again.
Sounds great. Thanks, you too.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for listening. Shoot.